Right before we dive in, let's make this story bigger than just me and you. Tell me in the comments, what part of the world are you watching from, and what's the clock striking there? Morning, night, or somewhere in between, I want to see how far this story can reach. Now lean closer. Here's where it all begins. The desert sun hung like a brass coin in a bleached sky, and the dust rose in slow spirals where weathered hooves met forgotten earth. In the kind of silence that only comes to dying towns, where even the wind seems to hold its breath, an old man rode into a place that had long since written him off as dead. His hands, leather-worn and trembling slightly on the saddle horn, told a story of violence survived and ghosts uncounted. His eyes, pale blue like winter ice, carried the weight of graves that never quite stayed buried. 3 young ranch hands lounging outside the saloon saw him coming and started laughing before he'd even dismounted. They saw the tremor in his right hand, the outdated gear, the paint horse that looked ready for pasture. They saw an old man who'd outlived his usefulness, his legend, his time. What they didn't see, what men like them never saw until it was too late, was the steel beneath the rust, the fire that grief had tempered into something harder than hate. And in the shadow of the general store, where 4 drunk cowboys surrounded a Navajo woman half their size, where cruelty masqueraded as dominance and cowardice hid behind numbers, that old man was about to remind this town of a truth they'd forgotten. Some men don't fade. They just wait for the right moment to show you what real strength looks like. His name was Cole Jameson. And this was the day everything changed. The town of Redemption, New Mexico, squatted in the desert like a sun-bleached skull, its buildings the color of dried bone, its streets veined with cracks that spoke of years without rain. It was high noon on a Wednesday in late August, the kind of day when the heat rose in visible waves and smart men stayed indoors with whiskey and shade. Cole Jameson felt the heat like an old enemy welcoming him home. It pressed against his skin, worked its way beneath his collar, reminded him of every hard year he'd spent in this God-forsaken territory. His paint horse, a mare named Testament who'd been with him longer than most friendships lasted, plodded forward with the resigned patience of the truly ancient. The ranch hands noticed, 3 of them, sprawled on the bench outside the Silver Dollar Saloon like wolves lazing after a kill. Cole recognized the type before he was close enough to see their faces, young, arrogant, the kind of men who'd never known real hardship and mistook their good fortune for personal virtue. "Look at this," the tall one said, his voice carrying across the street. "Old-timer on a horse even older. You lost, Grandpa?" Cole didn't respond. He guided Testament toward the general store's hitching post, moving with the deliberate slowness of a man who'd learned that haste often led to mistakes. That's when he heard the other voices. 4 ranch hands had formed a half-circle around a young Navajo woman. She stood with her back to the store's wooden wall, her chin lifted in defiance even as her eyes betrayed the fear she was trying to hide. "I said move along." "Squaw," the lead cowboy was saying. He was thick-shouldered and mean-eyed, the kind of man who enjoyed his power too much. "This here's a store for real Americans." "I have money," the woman said, her voice steady despite the tremor Cole could hear underneath. "I have the right to—" "You got no rights we're bound to respect," another cowboy cut in, stepping closer. "Mr. Thornton's made that clear enough." Cole started walking toward them. The ranch hands were so focused on their victim they didn't notice him at first. It was only when his shadow fell across their circle that they turned. "Well, well," the thick-shouldered leader said, grinning. "The old-timer wants to play hero. That's real touching, Grandpa. Why don't you shuffle on before that shake in your hand gets worse?" Cole positioned himself between the woman and the men. His right hand hung at his side, trembling slightly, but his eyes were steady, cold, carrying something in their pale depths that made the smartest of the 4 cowboys take an involuntary step back. "The lady was here first," Cole said, his voice quiet, almost gentle. "You boys best find somewhere else to water your tongues." The leader laughed, but there was uncertainty in it now. "Old man, you can barely hold a gun with that shake in your hand. Why don't you mind your business before you get hurt?" Cole didn't draw, didn't threaten, just stood there, solid and immovable as the mountains to the east. And then, surprising him, the Navajo woman stepped forward, not away from danger, but into it. She positioned herself beside Cole, her shoulder almost touching his. "2 against 4, she said quietly. "Better odds than I had a minute ago." The 4 cowboys stared, momentarily thrown. Their leader's hand drifted toward his gun, and Cole saw the moment crystallizing, saw the exact instant when talk would give way to violence. But before anyone could draw, a voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. "That's enough!" The voice came from a man pushing through the gathering crowd. He was massive, built like a bull, wearing expensive clothes that seemed out of place in the dusty street. His boots were polished to a mirror shine, his hat beaver felt, his vest embroidered with silver thread. But it was his eyes that caught Cole's attention. Cold, calculating, the eyes of a man who'd learned to see people as resources to be exploited or obstacles to be removed. Jackson Thornton. Cole recognized him even though 20 years had passed since they'd last met. Back then, Thornton had been a small-time cattle rustler with big ambitions. Now, from the looks of things, those ambitions had been realized. Thornton's eyes swept the scene, then fixed on Cole. Shock registered on his face, followed quickly by something harder to read. "Cole Jameson, heard you were dead." "Heard the same about my conscience," Cole said. "Looks like we were both wrong." Thornton's jaw tightened. He glanced at the Navajo woman, then back at Cole. "You've got no business here anymore, Cole. This is Thornton land now. Everything you see, the town, the ranches, the water rights, all of it. Then I guess I've got business making sure you remember that land comes with responsibilities," Cole said. The 2 men faced each other in the dusty street, and for a moment, the entire town seemed to hold its breath. The old gunfighter and the cattle baron, separated by 20 years, and a gulf of choices that could never be bridged. Thornton's hand rested on his belt, near the ivory-handled pistol that hung at his hip. Cole's hand trembled at his side, but his eyes never wavered. "This isn't your fight," Thornton said finally. "Walk away, Cole, for old time's sake." "Old time's sake?" Cole's voice was soft, dangerous. "You mean back when you were rustling cattle and I was the one who let you go with a warning instead of a noose? That what you're talking about?" Thornton's face darkened. "I paid my debt to society. I built an empire with my own 2 hands." "You built it on other people's land and other people's suffering," the Navajo woman said. "My people have lived in Shadow Canyon for generations. Your papers are lies." Thornton turned to her with undisguised contempt. "Your people are squatters on land I legally purchased from the territorial government. You have 1 week to vacate, or I'll have the sheriff remove you by force." "The sheriff works for you," she shot back. "Exactly," Thornton said, smiling. Then he turned and strode away, his ranch hands falling in behind him like trained dogs. In the silence that followed, the Navajo woman turned to Cole. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd initially thought, maybe late 20s, with dark eyes that held their own weight of sorrow and a scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw. "You didn't have to do that," she said. Cole studied her. "Yes," he said simply. "I did." She nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. "My name is Ayasha. It means little one in my language, though I'm not so little anymore. Cole Jameson. I know who you are," she said. "My grandfather spoke of you. Said you were the only lawman who ever treated our people with respect." Cole felt something twist in his chest. "Your grandfather?" "Joseph Whitehorse. He died 10 years ago." The name hit Cole like a physical blow. Joseph had been a scout, one of the best trackers Cole had ever worked with. More than that, he'd been a friend in a time and place where such friendships were rare. "Joseph was a good man," Cole said quietly. "I'm sorry for your loss." "And I'm sorry for yours," Ayasha said, her eyes flicking toward the cemetery on the hill. "My grandfather told me what happened." "To your family." Cole's hand tightened involuntarily. For a moment, he couldn't speak. Finally, he said, "That was a long time ago." "Grief doesn't follow a calendar," Ayasha said. "You know that as well as I do." They stood in silence for a moment, two people bound by loss and the scars it left behind. Then Ayasha gestured toward the general store. "I need to load supplies. My wagon is behind the store." "I'll help," Cole said. They worked in silence, loading bags of flour, coffee, dried beans, and other staples. Cole noticed how carefully Ayasha counted out her money, how she selected the cheapest options available. When the wagon was loaded, she climbed onto the bench and gathered the reins. "There's a canyon," she said. 20 miles northeast. Shadow Canyon. My people live there, about 40 of us. Families, elders, children. Thornton wants the land because there's a spring there. Clean water year-round. He's already diverted 2 other springs to his ranch. Shadow Canyon is the last one we have." "And he has legal papers?" Cole asked. Her smile was bitter. "He has papers signed by men who never set foot in Shadow Canyon, who don't know its history or its significance. Our claim predates your idea of ownership by centuries. Our claim is written in bones buried in that canyon soil, in the graves of our ancestors." "What will you do?" She looked northeast, toward the distant mountains. "Survive, endure, stand our ground until we can't stand anymore. What else can we do?" She drove away without looking back. Cole stood there long after she'd disappeared into the heat shimmer, feeling something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt in 20 years. Purpose. He mounted Testament and turned north, toward the cemetery, toward graves he hadn't visited in 2 decades, toward a reckoning that was long overdue. The cemetery sat on a rise north of town, surrounded by a low stone wall that was crumbling in places. Cole dismounted at the rusted gate and tied Testament to a fence post. He stood there for a long time before pushing the gate open, the hinges screaming in protest. The graves were on the eastern side, beneath a twisted juniper tree that somehow survived in this harsh country. 2 headstones, weathered but standing. Sarah Ann Jameson, beloved wife and mother, 1845, 1882. Michael Cole Jameson, beloved son, 1867, 1882. Cole's legs felt weak. He sank to his knees between them, his right hand pressed against the earth. The tremor spread through his entire body, making him shake like a man with fever. "Sarah, Michael." The words came out broken, rough. I don't even know where to start." The wind whispered through the juniper branches. Cole closed his eyes. "I told myself for 20 years it wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have known the Dalton gang would double back while I chased them into the desert, that I was doing my job, protecting the town." He opened his eyes, staring at Sarah's headstone. "But the truth is simpler and more terrible than that. I chose wrong. I chose the badge over you, over both of you." He could see Michael in his mind's eye, 15 years old, laughing, strong, full of dreams about horses and wide-open spaces. And Sarah, with her quiet strength and faith that he was doing important work. "I killed you," he said aloud. "Might as well have lit the match myself. I knew the Daltons were desperate. I knew they might double back. But I rode out anyway, left you alone in that house, because I wanted to be the hero who brought them in." A hot wind blew across the cemetery, carrying the scent of sage and dust. "I ran after I found you, after I buried you, after I hunted down every man in that gang and made them pay." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But it didn't bring you back. Nothing could bring you back." He traced Sarah's name on the headstone with one finger. "I met someone today, a woman named Ayasha. She's got the same strength you had, Sarah, the same fire. And there's a man, Thornton, pushing her people off their land. Same old story. Power crushing the powerless. He paused, thinking about Ayasha's eyes. About the 40 people living in Shadow Canyon who were about to lose everything. Maybe that's what you'd want. For me to stop running, to stand up one more time, not for glory or a badge, but because it's the right thing to do. He looked at his trembling hand. I'm 67 years old. My hand shakes. My reflexes are shot. But maybe I've got one more stand left in me. The wind picked up, whistling through the juniper branches. To Cole, it almost sounded like Sarah's voice, gentle and encouraging the way it had been on their wedding day. He stood slowly, his knees protesting. I don't know how this ends. I'm probably too old and too broken to make a difference. But I'm going to try. For you. For Michael. For the man I should have been. He touched his hat brim in salute, then walked back to testament. As he mounted up, he noticed his right hand. For the first time in hours, the trembling had stopped. Cole rode northeast, following the wagon tracks Ayasha had left in the dust. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the desert in amber and gold, casting long shadows that stretched like dark fingers across the sand. He had no clear plan, no strategy beyond showing up and offering whatever help an old man with a shaky hand could provide. But as testament carried him across the desert, Cole felt something shifting inside him. The weight he'd carried for 20 years wasn't gone. It would never be gone. But it felt different now, less like a crushing burden and more like a responsibility he could shoulder. The landscape changed as he rode. The flat desert gave way to rolling hills, then to broken country cut by arroyos and ravines. In the distance, he could see the dark line of mountains, and somewhere in those mountains was Shadow Canyon. He made camp that night beside a dry wash, building a small fire and boiling coffee in a battered tin pot. Testament grazed on the sparse grass nearby, her hobbles clanking softly. Cole sat with his back against a rock, drinking coffee and watching the stars emerge. He thought about Thornton. The man had been a two-bit rustler 20 years ago, but he'd clearly learned and adapted. He'd used the legal system, bought the right people, accumulated power the way some men accumulated gold. And now he was using that power to crush anyone who stood in his way. Cole reached Shadow Canyon late the next morning. The entrance was a narrow cleft between red rock walls, barely wide enough for a wagon. He dismounted and led Testament through on foot, his hand resting on his pistol out of habit rather than expectation. The canyon opened up after about 100 yards, revealing a hidden valley that took his breath away. Green grass, actual green grass, grew along the banks of a spring-fed stream. Cottonwood trees provided shade. Adobe structures, well-maintained and clearly loved, clustered near the water. Children's voices echoed off the canyon walls. Cole saw them playing near the stream, laughing and splashing, innocent of the threat hanging over their heads. Women worked at outdoor cooking fires, and men tended small gardens and livestock corrals. Ayasha emerged from one of the larger structures. She'd changed into traditional dress, and her hair was unbound. She walked toward him with the same directness she'd shown in town. "You came," she said. "Said I would." Many men say things they don't mean. Cole looked around the canyon, at the homes and the children and the life that had been built here over generations. "This is worth fighting for." "Yes," Ayasha said simply. "Come. I'll introduce you to the council." The council consisted of 5 elders, 3 men and 2 women, who sat in a circle inside the largest adobe structure. They regarded Cole with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Ayasha sat with them, translating when needed, though most of the elders spoke English. The eldest, a man named Thomas Brightwater, studied Cole for a long moment before speaking. I remember you. You rode with my brother Joseph many years ago. Joseph was a good man and a better friend, Cole said. I was honored to know him. Thomas nodded slowly. Joseph spoke well of you. Said you were one of the few white lawmen who saw us as people rather than problems. He paused. But that was 20 years ago. Why are you here now? It was a fair question. Cole considered his answer carefully. Because I've spent 20 years running from my failures. I failed my family. I failed the people who trusted me. Maybe I can't fix those failures, but I can choose to stand with you now. We don't need charity, one of the women said sharply. We need justice. I'm not offering charity, Cole said. I'm offering to stand with you. There's a difference. Thomas leaned forward. Thornton has the law on his side. He has hired guns. He has money and influence. What do we have? You have the truth, Cole said. And you have me, for whatever that's worth. One old gunfighter against Thornton's army? Another elder said skeptically. I'm not planning to fight an army, Cole said. I'm planning to expose Thornton's lies. Those land papers he's waving around, they're based on a fraudulent survey. I know because I was there when the original survey was done, back in 1878. The territorial surveyor was a drunk named Patterson who would sign anything for a bottle of whiskey. Ayasha leaned forward. Can you prove this? The original survey documents should be in the territorial capital in Santa Fe. If I can get copies, they'll show that the land Thornton claims to own was already designated as reservation land. That's a week's ride, Thomas said. We don't have a week. Thornton said we have to be gone in 7 days. Cole nodded. Then I need to buy you time. How? Ayasha asked. Cole stood, his hand resting on his gun belt. By reminding Thornton that some men don't scare easy. By making him think twice about moving too fast, and by showing him that you're not alone. Cole rode back to Redemption that afternoon. He went straight to Thornton's ranch, a sprawling operation north of town, with a gate marked by crossed T brands worked in iron. The hands at the gate tried to stop him, but Cole ignored them, riding past like they weren't there. He found Thornton in his study, a room that spoke of wealth and power. Persian rugs on the floor, leather-bound books on the shelves, a massive desk made of polished oak. Thornton looked up as Cole entered, surprise flashing across his face before being replaced by carefully controlled anger. This is private property. Jameson. So is Shadow Canyon, Cole said, but that hasn't stopped you. Thornton stood, placing his hands flat on the desk. I have legal title to that land. You have fraudulent papers based on a falsified survey, Cole said. I was there when Patterson did the original survey. I know what the real boundaries are, and I'm willing to testify to that in any court in the territory. For a moment, genuine uncertainty crossed Thornton's face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold calculation. Even if that's true, it'll take months to sort out in court, and in the meantime, I have the law on my side. Then I guess we'll see who blinks first, Cole said. Thornton walked around the desk, moving with the casual confidence of a man who'd never lost. You're making a mistake, Cole. Those people in Shadow Canyon, they're squatters, primitives. The territory needs men of vision, men who can build something lasting. Men like you? Yes, men like me. I've brought jobs to this region. I've built schools and roads. I pay my taxes and contribute to the community. He paused, his eyes hardening. What have you done besides run from your past? The words hit harder than any punch. Cole felt his hand trembling, felt the old shame rising, but he pushed it down. I've done plenty I'm not proud of, he said quietly. But I'm here now, and I'm telling you straight. You touch those people in Shadow Canyon, you'll have to go through me. Thornton laughed, but there was no humor in it. You? An old man with a trembling hand and a death wish? I have 20 men on my payroll who could put you in the ground before you cleared leather. Maybe, Cole acknowledged. But not before I tell everyone in the territory about those fraudulent papers. Not before I send telegrams to every newspaper from here to Denver. You've built your reputation on being a legitimate businessman, Thornton. How long will that last when people learn you're a fraud?" Thornton's face went dark with rage. For a moment, Cole thought the man might actually draw on him. But then Thornton mastered himself, his expression smoothing into something more dangerous. Cold calculation. "You're bluffing," Thornton said. "You don't have proof of anything." "Don't I?" Cole reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was actually just an old wanted poster, but Thornton couldn't see that from across the room. "Original survey notes, signed and dated. I kept them all these years just in case." It was a bluff, pure and simple. But Cole sold it with the same steady gaze he'd used to face down outlaws in a dozen dusty streets. And he saw the uncertainty flash across Thornton's face. "Give me the paper," Thornton said, reaching out. Cole stepped back, tucking it away. "Not a chance. This is my insurance policy. You leave Shadow Canyon alone, and this paper stays tucked away. You make a move against those people, and I'll make sure every newspaper in the territory sees it." Thornton's jaw worked. "I could have you killed right now." "You could try," Cole said. "But killing me would just prove I was right. And I've made arrangements. If anything happens to me, copies of this document go to 3 different newspapers." Another bluff, but delivered with absolute conviction. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Thornton said, "2 weeks. I'll give them 2 weeks to find somewhere else to go. That's the best offer you're going to get." Cole rode hard back to Shadow Canyon. 2 weeks wasn't much, but it was more than they'd had before. It was enough time to get to Santa Fe and back with the real documents, enough time to build a case that might actually stand up in court. He explained the situation to the council that evening. Thomas Brightwater listened carefully, then said, "You bought us time, but can you deliver on the documents?" "I'll do my damnedest," Cole said, "but I'll need help. Someone who knows the territory between here and Santa Fe, someone who can ride fast and hard." "I'll go," Ayasha said immediately. The council erupted in protests. It was too dangerous. She was needed here. A woman couldn't make that journey alone. Ayasha listened to all of it, then said simply, "I'm the best rider we have, and you all know it. Besides, I won't be alone. I'll have Cole." Thomas looked at Cole. "Can you keep her safe?" It was the question of a grandfather, not a chief. Cole met his eyes. "I'll protect her with my life." They left at dawn the next morning, riding fast toward the eastern mountains. They had 14 days to get to Santa Fe, find the documents, and get back. It was possible barely if everything went right, which, in Cole's experience, it almost never did. They rode in silence for the first few hours, pushing the horses hard but not recklessly. Cole found himself impressed by Ayasha's horsemanship. She sat her mount like she'd been born in the saddle, reading the terrain with an expert's eye, choosing routes that saved time without exhausting their horses. Around midday, they stopped to water the horses at a spring. Ayasha looked at Cole and said, "In town, when you stood up for me, that wasn't the first time someone's done that, but it was the first time someone did it without expecting anything in return." "I expect something," Cole said. Her eyes narrowed. "What?" "I expect you to keep fighting, to keep standing up, to keep being exactly who you are." He paused. "The world tries to grind people like you down, make you small, make you disappear. I expect you not to let it." Ayasha studied him for a long moment. Then she said, "My grandfather told me about your family, about what happened. He said you were never the same after." "No one is," Cole said quietly. "He also said you were the most honest lawman he'd ever met. That you couldn't be bought or scared off." She paused. "Is that still true?" Cole looked at his trembling hand, then back at her. "I don't know what I am anymore, but I know I'm tired of running, and I know that what Thornton's doing is wrong." "Then that's enough," Ayasha said. She mounted her horse. Come on, we've got a long way to go. They rode on into the afternoon, and for the first time in 20 years, Cole felt like he was riding toward something instead of away from it. That night, they made camp in a box canyon that offered protection from the wind and concealment from anyone who might be following. As they sat by the fire, Ayasha said, "Tell me about your son. What was he like?" Cole was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "Michael was 15 when he died. Smart as a whip, kind-hearted, always laughing. He wanted to be a horse trainer, said he could talk to horses better than people." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "He was probably right. He sounds wonderful." "He was. They both were." Cole stared into the fire. "I used to think the worst part was that they died. But that's not it. The worst part is all the moments they didn't get to have. Michael never got to train his first horse. Sarah never got to be a grandmother. All those moments just gone." Ayasha was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My mother died when I was 12. Sickness that the white doctors couldn't cure, and our medicine men were forbidden from treating. I used to be angry about all the things she'd miss. My wedding, my children, growing old." She looked at Cole. "But then I realized she'd want me to live those moments, not mourn their absence." "Is that what you think I should do?" "I think," Ayasha said carefully, "that you're already doing it. You're here. You're fighting. You're standing up when you could have stayed hidden." She smiled. "That's not nothing, Cole Jameson." They sat in comfortable silence as the fire burned down to embers. And somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled, its cry echoing off the canyon walls like a promise or a warning or maybe both. The journey to Santa Fe would take another 6 days. What they'd find there, Cole couldn't say. But for the first time in 20 years, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. And that, he thought, was a start.